welcome to your day off. My name is Corey, and I'm sitting with my best friend Gabby. What's up, Gab?
What is up?
Dude, I am so excited about today's podcast. You have no clue.
Yeah, I could tell from just the moment you sent me that text and you were like, "Hey, I have a guest in mind." And I was like, "Sounds good." And I went and looked up our Instagram page and was like, "Oh, this sounds amazing."
She is amazing. I can't wait to get into it. But I actually I won't say met our guest. However, what I did do is that I was able to watch her. I attended Serious Business, which is in New Orleans, which just the whole that was my first year going. I think they've been doing it for like 40 years or something, Gab, and I have no clue how the entire industry doesn't know about this. And it's my purpose this year to kind of tell the whole industry about this. They do it every January in New Orleans, and who doesn't want to be in New Orleans in January? Certainly us up north people. And what's really, I don't know if it's strange or odd, but it's called Serious Business, but never once did numbers or accounting come up. So I have no clue like where I guess it's just maybe that's what it was and it evolved past that. But it was such about like wellness and really about like where you stand and how you stand and stuff. Gab, I highly recommend you go next year.
Fun fact, I'm gonna maybe embarrass myself a little bit, but I think that's fine. When you were first talking about the event, because one of our previous guests was also at that event, Gordon Miller. I thought at first you were talking about Sirius FM or Sirius XM, Sirius
Oh yeah,
XM,
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah.
radio station,
Yeah, for sure.
like Sirius, but because you're like a podcaster, radio, like all that. I was like, oh yeah, Sirius, like you have some hookup, and then I was like, no, it's like Sirius, like being like serious, like legit serious, like you know, words.
Yeah, like legit serious, exactly. And
Yeah.
it was. I mean, I don't know. It was just magic. It's the first time, if I'm being frank, it's the first time that I've sat through an all day conference, meaning like just keynote after keynote, and I felt FOMO whenever I went to the bathroom. Like I felt like I need to be in that room because I'm going to miss out on something. I've never experienced that. Again, I kind of hate labels, but my ADD brain kind of like always zips me out of the room, and for whatever reason, I couldn't leave this room. It was just like I felt like every moment of the day there was just like impactful information. Anyways, I highly recommend it. So that's where I met our guest today, Gab.
Yes, let me bring her in so we can get into our um wonderful conversation. Um and yeah, please welcome to the podcast Dr. Rebecca Heiss.
Hey y'all, thanks so much for having me. I'm really
What's
excited to be
up?
here. I'm
What
so
can,
excited to be
can,
here.
can we call you doctor? Can we call you Oh, Rebecca, can we call you Skeeter?
Oh my gosh. Okay, you did some deep history dives there. That's yes, you may. Although you are one of the only people that will call me that, other than my dad. Yep, that's one of my old nicknames in basketball because I was annoying like a mosquito. So Skeeter it became.
Well, we want to be annoyed today, so please annoy us like a mosquito.
Oh, good. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
There.
Yeah, thank you. And look, I have to just say something really quick because I was listening to your intro. You guys were talking about serious business. And I love that Corey, you immediately were like, yeah, it had nothing to do with numbers and finance. And I think so often, when we're thinking about business, that's what we think about. And so much of the business is internal. It's the work that we're doing for ourselves to make sure, because your numbers won't matter if you're not taking care of you. Like if you take care of you, the numbers will follow. I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that. So
I love it. So give us a little bit of history. So you are an evolutionary biologist, which I've heard of, but I've never heard of a stress physiologist. Did I get it all right? Did I get all
yeah,
the just right?
you nailed it. You nailed it. Evolutionary biologist and stress physiologist. So I basically I look at why we make the terrible decisions that we make, especially under stress and pressure. And so I study the hormones and our behavior as a result of hundreds of years, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, which means that so often we're making very strange choices in the modern environment.
I actually my nephew I don't know if I talked about this in the podcast or not. Anyways, it doesn't matter. My nephew is a Navy SEAL, right? Like a
Mm,
like Navy SEAL,
nice.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a 1 year training. But you know what everyone always hears about is Hell Week. And I asked my nephew, I go, what was the hardest week of training? I was basically setting him up to tell me all about Hell Week because, you know, I was
Mm.
fishing, you know, I was just fishing that. And he said, you know, he calls me Unc. He goes, you know, Unc, it wasn't Hell Week, it was the week after Hell Week. And I go, the week after, why was that the worst? And how he explained it to me, how they explained it to him, was that and for a little clarity, Hell Week is about 5 or 6 days. I think you get like 4 hours sleep the entire week, and they literally put stress pressure on your body all week long. It's a lot of PT. It's a lot of sitting in cold water. It's a lot of what they call a sugar cookie, which means that you're covered in sand in places that you probably shouldn't be covered in sand, and all the things. And what he explained to me was that you have a bunch of type A's that have just accomplished this thing, and they're not allowed to work out, they're not allowed to run, to do any of this stuff, and that it was actually a hormonal, like, all your endorphins, your body has nothing left to give. And he said for the first time, and the only time really during his training, it's when the guys started fighting, it's when the guys like got really like hyped up, and there was like so much anger there. So and in a very small way, I know, like when I do an event weekend, and I'm sure you're this way too, when I do an event weekend, I come home and like for 2 days I'm spent. But by him explaining that, it kind of made sense to me. Like, oh, okay. Like, I just, because you go so hard at these things and you don't sleep and stuff, like, you know, there's just nothing left to give.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, stress to me, well, not to me, to science, stress is there to like help you power through those moments. And so what your nephew was experiencing is exactly that. Like all these endorphins, all the hormones, the adrenaline that your body can give, it gave. And so like just to your point, like at a conference, you're hyped up, you're working through the day, you don't sleep, you're out drinking at night, you sleep a couple hours, you go back and you're powering through the next day because it's exciting, you're charged up, and your body's experiencing tremendous stress, but it's actually that stress that drives you. And so it's the day after, the week after, that period where you should be the refractory period, really, where you're recovering, and your body is like, yo, that was a lot. I don't, what just happened? And that can be a really dark, difficult time for people.
Is it, sorry, Gab, I'm in it though.
Go
Now,
ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
is the body, so is the exhaustion because the body is working overtime to create new delicious hormones, or is it because all the delicious hormones are gone?
Yes, both, both. So you have a period of time through which your body can endure, right? And I'm pretty sure the trainers at Navy SEAL know exactly that breaking point. And so producing these hormones takes effort. It takes energy, right? If you've ever had an adrenaline filled weekend, it takes a lot of energy to keep your body going. And then at some point, there's a maximum amount where all of the receptors, and the way these hormones work is they bind with receptor molecules, which take them, they use them, they activate them, and then they have to disintegrate and bind again and bind again. And at some point, like all of those hormones are produced, all of the receptors are bound up, and it can't take anymore. There's no more room to produce more or bind more, and your body just goes, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm giving you everything, you're using it all, and there's nothing left. And so this happens like in any addiction, right? With alcoholism, with nicotine, right? You can produce and produce and produce and produce, and at some point, it's like I can't do this anymore, and that's when you start to see the breakdown. So again, for that Hell Week, you've got 5 days of intensity, and your body is maintaining and handling it and handling it and handling it and staying under stress, and then it's like, oh, that's it, that's all I got, and it has to go through a breakdown period to build back up.
Gab?
Yeah, what are your then, I guess, thinking like best pieces of advice for when you're then in that resting period, like things to do to take care of yourself to not make things worse? Because I feel like like especially thinking about when I was in college, like I worked, I took like max amount of credit hours. I worked like 3 on-campus jobs, was leading a student, like constantly going, and you need to give yourself a break. Like and a lot of hairstylists are like that too. Like they're constantly working, or then they're at a trade show. Like it is a lot. What are your sort of tips for how to then like best take care of yourself during that resting period.
I love this question. I love this question. And I'm going to take it in a slightly different direction.
Mm-hmm.
So bear with me here, because I am in no way, shape, or form saying that you are not busting your hump and all, you know, I know this industry, like y'all are on your feet. You are running hard. You are staying in it all day, every day. And I want to make a separation between that and what we just talked about with Navy SEAL training. If you are getting more than 4 hours of sleep throughout an entire week, you're actually recovering more than you recognize. And that's not to say you shouldn't take a break. You shouldn't engage in self-care. Like, that's really important. But I think, you know, when I talk about stress, we typically look at this Yerkes-Dodson curve. There will not be a quiz. Basically, it's an upside down U, right? And you kind of increase your performance to a point with stress, and then you start to crash. And what you're describing is like, I'm on this side of things, right? I'm on the crash side where I just can't keep up. And a lot of that, and this is where my research kind of separates from that Yerkes-Dodson curve, a lot of that is how we think about stress. Because we're like, okay, well, I need to just get rid of all my stress. I need to go Netflix and chill. I need to like just absolutely zone out, have a glass of wine, and sleep for 10 hours. Sometimes, yes. And sometimes it's the everyday grind that we're going, I'm in this grind and I feel this thing and this is really bad for me and I have to escape it. And that's actually the thing that needs to switch more than the self-care piece. One of the things that I think is most important for self-care is recognizing that this doesn't have to be bad. And so if we can recognize that stress is actually our body giving us energy to do the thing that we are set on earth to do, like that we are excited about, that we are purpose filled with, we can treat it differently. And we can actually perform at our highest and still have energy. Not saying you don't need sleep, really important, but still have energy where it's not a need for a complete refractory period before you go back again. So I think so much of that is reframing. What does this mean to me? Like, and if you are doing something that is meaningful and purposeful, and you can frame that energy in a space where you're like, this is not an exhaustion thing. This is my body rising to the occasion. What the science says is that actually is the most healthy way to live life and the most purposeful and meaningful lives that are lived.
Okay, hold on. We got
It's a lot to take in. I know.
Doesn't it seem counterintuitive? It seems a little bit counterintuitive, you would think.
It
but
does.
I
it does. So I'll ask the same question that I asked at Serious Business, and this is because it feels really counterintuitive to people. And look, there was a 2013 study that correlated the most meaningful, purposeful lives with the highest amount of stress. And like when I read that, I was like, even as a stress physiologist, I'm like, dude, they got something wrong. Like, people need a break, right? But then I asked a follow-up question in this study, and here it is. So think about the purpose, or think about the most meaningful, purposeful thing, some project or an accomplishment that you're really, really proud of. Right? Now go back in time to when you were in the middle of doing that. What was your stress level?
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's off the charts for people. And so my goal as a stress physiologist is to help people recognize in the moment, not retrospectively looking back and going, yeah, that was meaningful and purposeful. And yes, I was stressed. But in the moment, to feel the stress and go, oh, I'm doing meaningful work. This is my body helping me do that meaningful work.
That's really good. Yeah, that's really good. It's just being, and this is certainly, hopefully my practice. I'm trying really hard on it, but just to stay in the moment, and stay aware of the surroundings. And honestly though, I mean, from stuff that you read and stuff, like the stress isn't usually, it's usually like the stress is like an hour down the road, or the stress is like a day down the road, or it's more about like reaching some particular outcome more than it is the actual work. If you could kind of just remove that there's this out, and I know it's impossible kind of, I'm talking gibberish in a sense, but like if you can kind of remove the thought that like there's an outcome related to what you're doing now and just stay
Yeah.
focused on what you're doing now, like that never seems like, for me at least, it never seems like the stress. It always seems like, oh, there's a
In
timeline
the
on,
future.
or I have to achieve a certain metric, or I have to whatever. I mean, it's all
Mm.
Gordon Gekko in a sense.
Yeah, no, Corey, you're not talking gibberish. That's spot on. So one of my favorite things to point out to people is that humans are the only animal that create stress in our own heads. So, for example, think about lions. When they hunt, lions fail 80% of the time. 80% of the time they go out to do their job and they fail miserably. And you know what they do immediately afterwards? They don't sit there going, "Oh my God, I'm going to starve to death. Oh my gosh, I'm a terrible lion. I can't believe I just suck so bad. I just," no, they take a nap. They just lay down and take a nap. And then they go at it again. And I feel like we can learn so much from that. And the zebra that just outran that lion doesn't go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I just escaped." They just go back and they eat grass. That's it. Like there's not this follow up. "Oh my gosh, what's next? How do I avoid?" So often, if to your point, if we can stay in the moment, this isn't stressful. But if I'm laying in
Well,
bed,
you're not on this side of the month.
yesterday,
Yeah.
but last night, if I'm looking at my schedule, I'm like, "Oh my God, I have to fit this in. I have to do this. I have to do." I love this. I love this. So in the moment, knowing that this is part of the work
All
is
right.
beautiful.
All right, I'm gonna move the conversation in a different
Let's
direction.
go.
Maybe it's a different direction, maybe not. I don't know. But there's so much that's brought onto, and both this is stress and evolutionary to me. Like there's so much conversation certainly that we weren't meant to have. Well, back up. I have this theory, and then we'll move forward. I have this theory that I was actually with Elizabeth Fay, who you met at the conference, who frankly is one of my favorite people on the earth.
Yeah.
I was at her conference in Zion National Park a few years ago, and I'm laying down, looking straight up at the Milky Way and like the depth of the universe. Literally, I'm looking at the depth of the universe in a way that I hadn't seen or I hadn't identified before. And I have this theory that within the human experience, I think we became disconnected with nature once we had light pollution, because light pollution keeps us, because even prior to like artificial light sources, like even if you lived in a city and you were like, you're being crawled on, by other people like rats, but even if you could see into the heavens, or you could see the depth of the sky, you realized that you were connected to something bigger and grander. So with that, this is unless you have some input, I transition it by saying, are we evolutionarily equipped with city life, with lack of with lack of that, with lack of stars, with lack of knowing where we stand, with our relationship with social media, with our relationship with all these things, evolutionarily, are we equipped for this? And let's just open the conversation.
Yeah, short answer, no. Yeah, our brains are built for the savannah. Our brains are built for a life where we lived in community with 150 people, and we lived in a tribe with people that we rely on and we count on and we work together with. And it is not built for the comparison mode of social media or the quick fast food restaurants that we find ourselves eating. It's built for a very different time. And actually, it's really interesting that you mentioned the outdoors. So I'm this is one of the areas that I'm really committed to. My early research was on urban and rural differences, and showing cortisol levels spiking, so your main stress hormone spiking in urban areas, and like the health detriments of urban areas. And I actually started writing another book. Bear with me. It's not going to be out. I'm not pitching anything here, but I'm really interested in this concept of awe.
Spell
So AWE, awe,
it.
wonder, which I think is the experience you had looking up at the stars in Zion. And what awe and wonder does in the human body actually mimics the hormonal profile of how I believe we were meant to live. So you experience awe under specific conditions. Music, that like sum of like music, collective I forget what the word is, but it's collective effervescence. So think of people moving together, the conference experience that you have, like people that are together and you're thinking about the same things, you're talking about the same things, you're maybe moving in the same way, dancing the same way. Large, vast experiences like Zion, like looking up at the stars, like feeling small. And I think in a world that values, especially American culture, values the individual and how much one can achieve, we've actually lost our ability to find worth and value and joy and wonder in the smallness of our lives, in the insignificance of us. And it's led to a lack of community. It's led to a very competitive environment that actually makes us very sick. So I think you're spot on with your hypothesis. And, there's all kinds of science that talk about forest bathing and getting out in nature and just you'll notice I've got green plants behind me. And yes, they are every single one of them fake because I can't keep anything alive. But even having a fake green plant tricks your dumb brain into believing that it's rich and nature-like, and it actually decreases your cortisol levels and increases your productivity just by having a green plant around. So yeah, our brains are definitely wired for a different time. And I think the more we recognize that and the more we can be cognizant of what our brains are saying we need, the more we can find joy and satisfaction and peace and deep, resonant purpose when we slow down enough to go, what am I feeling in my body right now? What does that mean?
I love that. I love that so much. And it's funny because everything kind of leads back to nature, right? Like we're hearing a lot about grounding, we're hearing a lot about breathing, we're hearing a lot about, just take a walk. It's all the things that, everything that removes you from the digital age is the exact opposite of a digital age. Okay. Question that's been burning my ass for 20 years. And I never had an evolutionary biologist to talk about this, but I'm really interested in what your perspective is. Does evolution fail us if we're always 100,000 years behind?
Yeah. Does it fail us? No. Is there a time lapse? Yes. So we're in a period of time starting with really the Industrial Revolution, where technology has outpaced biology as for humans. So humans are weird in a number of ways. First of all, we live way too long. And look, I'm a person who wants to live to 120. I'm not saying that like we should all die, but biologically, we're supposed to die by like 40. Like that's how our bodies are set up. That's how our hormones are set up. Menopause wasn't a thing for our ancestors. Like you died way before then, right? And so I don't think evolution is failing us. I think we are failing evolution. And I think we have outsmarted ourselves in a way.
We outhacked ourselves.
Yeah, in a way that is unproductive. So like all of this technology that's supposed to make our lives easier, what we've done is we've used it now to make more money. What the hell? What is money? Like what even is that? Like all the things that our biology says we need: safety, food, water, shelter, companionship. That's about it. And yeah, we've got some food, and we've got some water, and we have 300,000 square foot houses or whatever it is now, like or 3,000. Like, and we've lost all of the other connections that we really need. And instead, we're filling our banks full of this weird currency that's pieces of paper that doesn't equate anything. But what drives that is interesting. So what drives that is this biology of status, and especially for men. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm not picking on you. Women, we have our own things. I'm happy to talk about it. But men have been traditionally evolutionarily valued for their status, for their dominance. So if you look at just mating protocols, one male had most of the offspring, right? For like most of evolution, one male produced most of the babies because he was the big guy on top. And how do we establish dominance in today's modern society? It's what's your bank account? What shoes you got on? What Rolex are you wearing? Like that's how we say, oh, that's the man, that's the dude, that's the guy on top. And that's really unfortunate because I personally, seeing this from an evolutionary perspective, that makes me really sad for those people, because you're driving yourself in a manner that is biologically relevant, but is really going to be a very empty space to land.
Gab?
Yeah. I've always said like you can't take it with you when it comes to stuff like that, like money and all that. Like it only exists here, and then we all, like you said, we all die. So
yeah.
Can't take it with you. Anyway, I think one thing that's also interesting, doing some research, like looking at your website, talking about fear, and I think that's something to sort of pivot us and take us a little bit in a different direction. I think we were also talking about public speaking too, when a lot of hair professionals, there's sort of this push to be multifaceted and be an educator or be a social media influencer, do a lot of things where you have to be sort of in public or be a public figure, or even just like hairstylist day to day. I imagine, Corey, you've had an experience too where you've like messed up a haircut or something, and then you're like, oh no, is the client going to freak out at me? Like, I think there's a lot of fear that's associated in being a hair professional and what it is that you do. Do you want to sort of talk about like the best ways to navigate that and sort of come out stronger?
Gosh, sure, I'd love to talk about that. I think one of the big shifts, and I presented this at Serious Business, but the formula that I use, I call it the fearless stress formula. And the idea is you're not getting rid of fear, right? You're just fearing a little bit less. I think that so many of us are like, well, I shouldn't feel anxiety, or I shouldn't have fear. And it's like, no, you should. That's a superpower, right? It's telling you what's important to you. So like the fact that you have fear over screwing up a haircut means that you really value your industry. You really value the work you do. I think that's a gift. So when we shift that energy into using it for us, again, the formula is simply, it's not a tiger. This is not a life and death situation. You screw up the haircut, that sucks. It feels bad in the moment, and you don't die, the client doesn't die. Okay. So what do we do with that? Well, we can begin to transfer that energy. And that energy, that fear energy, can be, instead of trying to get rid of it, right? We can say, okay, I'm excited. I feel this. It must mean I'm excited to do my very best. I feel this nervousness. Oh, that nervousness is driving me to my highest potential, because stress serves us. Like stress is literally our body's response to saying, this is important, and I'm gonna make this as enhancing as possible. I'm gonna allow you to have blood rushing to your brain so you can think more clearly, to rush to your fine motor skills so you can cut more precisely. Like stress is actually helping us, and if we can reframe it to go, oh, this is in service. And stay curious about it. That's step 2, right? That transfer. Then step 3 is the trajectory. Like now that we have our butterflies kind of in alignment, now where do we point it? And the best place to point it is really up to you. Like, how do you want to use that energy? And I suspect it's like, I'm going to give the very best cut I can. And what's outside of my control is, it may not be great this time, or the client may not like it. And so that's where we have to let go and go, look, I'm going to do the best that I can. And the trajectory that comes back to me, the only other option is I don't do it at all. And the cost of that inaction is so much higher than the cost of action.
Okay. I can end here. So a little backstory. When I was like 23 or 24 years old, it was the first time I ever had to present on stage. There's about 300 people in the room. And I had a full out panic attack on stage. And like, I couldn't, and the only thing I'm thinking about on stage is like, how do I get off this stage? How do I get off this stage? How do I get off this stage? Like my brain went completely blank. Like, literally, if you ask me my name at that moment, and I'm being literal, I don't think I could up an answer, like, I mean, luckily and thank goodness I had a model on stage, so I could just put my focus on the model, then go like, and then I'm out of here. But all the clever shit that I wrote and I thought I was going to be smart about, which was the mistake, by the way, because preparation also preparation isn't all the answer. It's most of the answer, but it's not all the answer, because that preparation, you also have to live within your own shoes. And I was not living. I wanted to be smart. I wanted to be clever. I wanted to be all these things that clearly I'm not smart and clearly I'm not clever. But it,
Oh,
but hear me out. I was using words that aren't in my vocabulary. I was living as this other person, which I think was the downfall because I couldn't come up with the words, right?
yeah.
Which would then set off the full panic attack. Anyways, Rebecca, literally 5 years later, I would wake up in the middle of the night and full out sweat and panic still on that stage. And it killed me. And I avoided every public speaking. And this was like 2000. No, I'm lying. This was like 95, right? And I avoided all public speaking. And by the way, even at company meetings, like I'd be the first one to throw a joke, but I'd be the last one to speak to those same people. It's such a bizarre thing that I went through. And then all the way till 2015. And what happened in 2015 was a good friend of mine, she asked me to officiate her wedding. Are you ready for this? Gabby, are you ready for this? I told her.
Drop it.
I said, no, I'm not going to officiate your wedding. And then like, I come in my house and my wife's like, so what'd you say? And I go, I told her no, of course. And she's like, you big idiot. You can't do that. So
Heartbreaking. Yeah.
yeah, y'all. And
Yeah.
wrenching, right? So I called her and I go, okay, I definitely will officiate your wedding. And then literally from the second I said yes until her wedding 8 months later, I don't think I slept. It was just like it was so brutal. And I mean, I still go through kind of that anyways. But to your point, once I started engaging and talking in front of people, like so much stuff has opened up for me, which again, had we rewound to 2010, like nothing opens up because avoidance isn't growth.
Oh my gosh, that's such a good line. That's such a good line. Fear is always going to say anything but failure, anything but rejection, anything but me being on stage and getting that frozen moment. But it doesn't point us toward anything. It doesn't point us toward that growth. I love that. And I want to hit on a point that I think you just nailed, which is so often, especially with public speaking and educating or any kind of being in front of a crowd, that is like a huge fear for people, which is very biologically.
Apparently. If you listen to Jerry Seinfeld, it's very
that's right. Very biologically relevant, right? You're in front of your tribe, and they have the opportunity to reject you. You're gonna die, right? You're gonna get kicked out. That's a huge threat. But what you said about that first experience when you're like, I'm trying to be clever, I've got all these things that I'm going to say, this is the shift that I suspect you made. And I know I had to make because I can tell you a story about like absolutely bombing on stage. And it was the same experience. I was trying to impress. I made it about me and I wanted to impress my audience, right? I wanted to impress them instead of trying to impact them. This isn't about me. This isn't about you, right? This is about the impact that I can create. And when you officiated your friend's wedding, that's the impact. You're like, this is the gift that I have. Here you go. This is the gift. And that shift is so powerful when you stop trying to impress, stop trying to prove yourself. And look, I'm gonna raise my hand right now and say, I still struggle with that. Like you're talking to somebody whose job it is to have people applaud her. So that might tell you a little bit about my psychology, right? Like it's very real, but making that shift is a really powerful trajectory towards something rather than away from.
It's funny you brought that up because I just realized it in this moment is the conversation I was having with myself during the entire wedding preparation was that, and I was very purposeful in that this is not about me. This is about that beautiful girl in the dress, right? It's her day. It's not about me, and nobody's here to see me.
Right?
Like I am just the shadow of this day. Like no one's here to see me, And that was easy. Now I will tell you this, and I'm so glad I did this. I recorded myself no less than 50 times officiating this wedding, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm so glad I did because when I first started, I sound like a Southern Baptist minister, dearly. We're gathered here today, but I had to watch the video back and like just be super awkward in my space. You know what? That was such a blessing for me because it kind of even by watching those videos, it's like, okay, like settle down, bro. Like settle down. Like calm and like, and it forced me to because there was no getting out of officiating a wedding, unless I forced them to break up before. There's no getting out of it. Like I had to do it. I had to show up.
I'll
you know.
tell you what, that is one of the methods that I don't usually prescribe to people, right? But burning the ships, like this is it. You are committed. So figure out how you show up and do it in the fear. Don't, you're not trying to get rid of fear. You're still going to be anxious. Of course you're going to be anxious about it. But how can you hold both anxiety and adventure excitement together in the same space? Because, we think we have to choose, like, oh, either I'm going to be fearless and I'm just going to go in and charge and just knock this out, or I'm going to have anxiety. And then when people have anxiety, they're like, oh no, it's the latter. I'm going to suck. And it's like, dude, no, like that's natural. That's your body going, this means something to me.
Oh,
So
I don't know,
then we
man. I don't know.
really,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
say
yeah,
more,
yeah, yeah.
say
Okay,
more, say more.
here we go. So what I realized that when I'm on a stage, and no matter what stage it is, like I have such like literal fight or flight. Like I'm
Yeah,
like I'm squirreling out so much in my head. Like
yeah.
I'm looking, it's actually, and this just dawned on me too as I was telling you the story, is that that initial reaction that I had, like, how do I get off the stage? I still have that all the time. I
Mm-hmm,
still have, how do I get off this stage? Now, I will tell
mm-hmm.
you, I'm not a doctor. I'm not prescribing anything for anyone, but I'll tell you what's been very helpful for me, and that's
Yeah,
taking a beta blocker. And the beta
yeah.
blocker that I take is propanolol, and propanolol has changed. Actually, if you ever see me on stage, I'm sorry, because now I actually love being on stage and I don't want to leave the stage. But it's just that beta blocker removes, what a beta blocker does is it removes that animalistic fight or flight. And then it's like, sit and do instead of fight or flight, and it's been absolutely positively game changing for me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't take it for about an hour before I step on stage, and until that hour before, I'm still a nightmare, losing sleep and all that good stuff.
So this is the scientist in me, Corey. I'm really curious because now you've had these repeated experiences of like loving the stage and being on it and like feeling like you own it and having that really positive experience. Here's my guess. This is just a guess, but
right.
I'd lean into this. I bet if just before you went on stage next time, I handed you a placebo, I handed you a sugar pill, I was like, here's your beta blocker, dude, and you took it, you'd be just as comfortable. You'd be just fine. And so often, like it's the brain's trickery because it's just producing different hormones because you're like, oh, I got my beta blocker, so I'm good. So
Yeah.
now I'm not going to experience it. And you tell yourself that story. And as a result, this is what happens. And like this is, man, when I started looking at placebo effects, holy cow, y'all. Like most of the prescriptions, like the majority of doctors have prescribed a placebo in the last year.
Mm.
Full stop. Why? You're like, oh, that seems unethical. Yeah, except that it works. So,
That's crazy.
it's wild. It's wild. But our brain is that powerful. So, like, do an experiment if you can. Like, if you have somebody who you really trust, he's like, nope.
You're like, no, thanks.
No, because you know why? Because that'll just be in my head then. Like it would literally have
That's
to
right.
be like it would literally have to, and then what would happen is the beta blocker wouldn't work, Rebecca.
That's right, because
I'd be like, oh,
so,
I know I took the
we
placebo.
right? We did this experiment. With graduate students because you can get graduate students to do anything. Where like we'd rub them with an oak leaf, like or maple leaf or something completely innocuous, and we'd tell them it's poison ivy, and they would break out
No,
as if we put poison ivy on them. And we tried that in reverse, and we'd like rub poison ivy and be like, it's just maple leaf, don't worry about it. And like we had a very low response to poison ivy, even though we're because we told them a different story. And that to me, like it is mind blowing to think about something that's so it's literal poison. But if your
No,
brain doesn't
that's
register it as,
crazy.
yeah. So the power of the stories that we tell ourselves is something that I am beyond fascinated by. And I think the stories that we tell ourselves, we don't even register most of the time because it's just, I'm just doing the thing. And like, we're busy being busy. And our lives plan themselves for us while we're busy being busy. And we never pause long enough to go, what brings me joy? what impact do I want to have? Like, how do I show up in a way? What story do I need to tell myself to become the thing that I want to become for this world? And I think without that, we're destined to continue to cycle in the space of
Yeah. I love that. That's so powerful.
Sorry, Gab. I promise you I'm going to let you talk, but she's
You're good. You're good.
this is a This is a transition, not a trend. This is actually going backwards and being a transition at the same time. So
Yeah.
on this exact thing, right? We believe what we believe. You sat on stage in front of 1,000 people at Serious Business, and you said that people that believe in stress kills them. It literally kills them. And people that
Yeah.
don't believe in stress killing them. What is this study? And get me to buy it.
Yeah. Okay. So this was a study done in 2013 over the course of 8 years, looking at 30,000 Americans, right? And for 30,000 Americans over the course of 8 years, people that, and we looked at the amount of stress that they had in their lives, self-reported amount of stress, right? And the people that had very, very high levels of stress, bad news first, who believed that stress was bad for them, I'd say that's the majority of us, right? Died at a 43% higher mortality rate than the standard sample. Whoa, full stop. Here's the good news. People with that same very high level of stress in their life who believed that stress wasn't bad for them, at the very least, maybe even believed stress was good for them. Doesn't matter, as long as it wasn't bad for them, died at the lowest rate of the entire study, even lower than the people who said they had very little stress in their lives, who were like retired and, I don't know, had a trust fund or something, had very low stress. They died at higher rates than people with very high stress who believed that stress was not bad for them. Because they had purpose, because they had a goal, right, that this stress was driving them toward. And what that meant is that 182,000 people died through that course of that study, which incidentally would make the belief that stress is bad for you, not stress itself, but the belief that stress is bad for you, the like number, I don't know, 12 thing of like the highest death rate, like higher than skin cancer. Like people die more of the belief that stress is bad for them than die of skin cancer. Like, what?
That's wild. I feel like
yeah,
kind of, because whenever I have any conversations like this, I like listen and process, and then kind of I'm like, okay, what is the repeat theme? And it's sort of just seems like it's about storytelling, like the stories you tell yourself. Yeah. Because a quick tangent, but also relevant. In school, like when I was in high school, I hated science. Like it was my least favorite subject. Like I was like, I hate biology, I hate chemistry, I hate AP physics. God, I hate AP physics. AP physics is so stressful for me. You mentioned part like thinking about the most stressful period of your life. It was AP physics, but that was like that was a journey for me. And it is interesting to hear you. No, yeah, but it felt like it was. Jeez. My junior year of high school felt like it was going to kill me. Sidebar. But the whole thing is that I find really interesting is that I've always been like I've always loved reading and books and storytelling. And so it's interesting to see like the storytelling in science, because that's always why I was very anti-science, because it felt like it was numbers and like all this stuff. Like, again, you were talking about early on in the episode, Corey, stuff like that I was just like never like my right brain like did not comprehend. And it is interesting to see the storytelling side of science and seeing that there, because I think it makes it more palatable to people who may be like more right brain creative, which a lot of hairstylists are, and it makes it easier to understand and realizing how much storytelling plays a role in your overall well-being.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Gabby, like one of my trigger words is manifest. I'm like, oh my gosh. And there's a lot of science behind it, like a lot. I created an entire lecture series around manifestation for skeptics, because I'm a born skeptic. I'm a trained scientist, and it turns out that like so many of this manifestations, it's the story that we're telling, and then it works because we're looking for it and we see the possibilities, and energy is real, and so it's one of my favorite things is to bring this. I think naturally I'm a creative and I'm trained as a scientist. And so bringing those two worlds together and saying, well, let's look at the stories that our brain has embedded from our instincts from, 200,000 years ago. And then let's look at the story we want to be telling and create a way forward that that is more powerful for all of us. And I don't think it's explored enough. So thank you for pointing that out, Gab. Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
awesome. A conversation that we've had in the industry, certainly as long as I've been on social media, maybe forever though. Is can we walk down like the imposter syndrome road? Like what is
Yes.
like we talk so much about it as an
Love it.
industry, but like what from from science based,
Yeah.
like what is imposter syndrome? Why do we do it? And more and most importantly, like how do we transition out of it?
Love it. Okay. Here's what imposter syndrome is. And I want to actually change the story here,
Yeah.
because I don't want to call it a syndrome. Syndrome is a disease, something that you have. And I think it's
Call it
imposter
imposter
thinking.
bullshit.
Yeah. It's imposter stories. It's imposter thoughts. And the science will say about 80% of people experience imposter syndrome. I think 20% of people are lying, because I think this is a very, very natural thing to have. When you are in a tribe, when you are around 150 people that know you deeply and intimately, you constantly think that what you know isn't as valuable as other people. And the result of that created a better sense of community because you were humbled by that. Here's the thing that I think in modern environment, what happens? We're little kids. We're looking around. We're seeing Gabby's falling off of her bike and Corey's falling off of his bike and I'm falling off mine. And this is great. We're all falling off of bikes together as kids. And then we hit a certain age and we look around the room and we're like, oh, he knows the things and she knows the things. And I don't know those things. I'm supposed to be an adult. How did I not? Like, y'all, I don't understand taxes. I'm over 40 years old. I should know some things that I do not know. And all of the knowledge that I do have, I just assume everybody else has because I have it. And so like it's second nature to me. It's second nature to me to be like, oh yeah, this cortisol response starts here. And it goes, I'm like, you don't know that? Huh. So there's the way imposter thinking began was keeping a community tight and tied together and not having people believe that they're better than one another. And that's a powerful source. And how it manifests today is everybody walking around afraid that they are going to fail, afraid to show up as themselves, afraid to be authentic and raise their hand and learn and grow. Because if I don't know how to trim bangs and I've been in the industry for 20 years, I feel like I should know how to trim bangs. And so I'm not going to say anything because I'm just going to sit here going, I missed that somehow and everybody else has to have that. And the reality is none of us do. And so, or maybe one of us does, but they don't know how to do a fringe or they don't know how to. So being fearless enough to go, I don't know a lot of the things, and show up as that non-expert is a really powerful space to be, and people respect you more for it. So like if I stood here all day and you asked me questions that I don't know, you asked me questions about physics, I'd be like, I don't know. I don't know. And genuinely, I think we've lost that in our vocabulary because we are so scared of not being enough that we're working to prove ourselves all the time. And in reality, when people show up authentically and they're like, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me out? It's actually a really much more powerful space to be in. So I'll say one more thing about imposter and I'll stop. One of the things that I learned about imposter thinking was that for me anyway, when I started speaking to leaders, which everybody in this industry is, whether or not you read the leadership books, but that's where I started. I started with these leadership books and trying to understand the basic tenets of leadership. And what I realized was that 92% of those books for the last 100 years were written by straight white men. Now, there is nothing wrong with straight white. I love straight white men. I married a straight white man. But it begs the question, if there is one perspective that we have decided has the knowledge, is the keeper of the knowledge, and this is how things shall always be done, of course I don't feel like I fit. Of course I don't feel like I belong. Of course I don't feel like I know or understand how to play the game or the rules that I come with. And so I think there's a way that as imposters we can show up giving ourselves permission to play by a new rule, play by a new game, and allow ourselves to learn and grow in that without feeling like we're imposters, by showing up and going, I'm a learner. I'm a learner, not an imposter. The imposter is just the negative side of a learner.
I like that. I like that perspective. You know, I can
Yeah.
remember back being even a young kid, kind of having imposter syndrome, you know,
Mm-hmm.
about my family and
Yeah.
stuff. Like we're not Catholic enough, or we're not good enough. We're not everybody. Our family's dysfunctional. Everyone else's family isn't. You know, which is
Mm.
just it, once
Right.
again, it's the storytelling that we tell ourselves. You know, like it's interesting. I have a whole theory about that too. Just about, and I think it takes experience to kind of get to it, but like half the stuff that I told people was my own story and my own understanding of it. I have this. This is actually my Christmas morning epiphany. I don't know if I shared it, but my Christmas morning epiphany is that most of the stories that we've told ourselves happen when we didn't have a full frontal lobe. Like,
That's true.
like, so most of the stories that we tell ourselves live in that space. You know, usually it's from our childhood, and you don't have the perspective. You physically don't have a full frontal lobe to even understand really what's going on, nor do you have the perspective except your own, and the experience of your own to have to judge all these experiences and judge all these people in your life. But these are also the same hills we're willing to die on. You know,
Oh,
with,
that's
with,
so
with,
true.
without like saying, you know what, I wasn't fully developed there. I probably am lacking perspective. I wasn't fully developed then. I'm probably lacking, some kind of knowledge or know. Because you only know what you know. You don't relearn what you know. That doesn't make sense, but I'm trying to make sense out of it. You don't later then have
Unlearning.
the
Yeah.
perspective. You don't later then have the perspective to say like, oh, I was probably off base there. And certainly what I see what's going on in a broader sense. See what I see going on social media now is that there's a lot of finger pointing without them pointing the fingers to themselves and saying, how was I accountable to this behavior? How was I accountable to this, whatever this is, anyways, that was my Christmas morning epiphany.
No,
And
I think that's a really good
so much
epiphany.
healing. There was a lot of healing in it too. I was like, oh, wait a sec. Here's what I know. I know my
Yeah.
parents did the best that they knew how to do. And I know as a parent, I've done the best that I know how to do. And maybe my daughter would say that I'm a terrible dad. I don't think she would, but I can't be responsible for that. Well, I am responsible for that. Hold on, let me hold on.
You
But
can
you know what I'm
both
saying?
be responsible for it, accept your limitations, and say and know that you are doing. So this is what I talk about being the outcome goal. You don't have control of the outcome. You don't have control over what she's going to think of you as a parent, right? What you do have control over is showing up to the best of your ability and giving grace to those around you, saying, I know, look, I can see the shortcomings of my parents. I can see the shortcomings of my colleagues, and I know they are doing this to the best of their ability. And that is a hard place to offer forgiveness and grace. But I think we are all so much more happy when we're, instead of trying to like point blame and shame and guilt and pain onto other people, we can say, how can we show up not to be right, but to get it right? How can we show up together to get this as right as we can, and letting go of what's outside of us? So yes, I take ownership and responsibility for how I show up in the world, and I can't take ownership and responsibility of how you feel or how I fail in your eyes.
I love that. I've
Yeah.
said this on another podcast, but I try to be thoughtful enough to give myself permission to be wrong,
Oh,
and not
so
think
hard.
it really, no, it totally is.
Yeah.
But like is this a belief system, or am I making it, or am I making my reality a belief system?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we kind of like cut through what is a belief system? Another theory that I have is that change isn't about what's next. Change is always giving up a belief system, which is the hard part of it. Because change is like sexy, right? Like think about like when you first started dating your
Oh, say that again. Can you say that again? Change is not about what's
change is
next.
not
Change
about
is
what's
about,
next. It's about giving up a belief system. It always is. It's where your energy, it's where your energy lies, even within change. I mean, think about like when you move into a new house.
good.
New house is like awesome. You're gonna miss your
Yeah.
the new house is the new car is cool, but you're gonna kind of miss your other car.
Yeah.
It's still running. Think about relationships. When you first enter a relationship, it's very like sexy and like there's all these endorphins and it like just feels so good, you know.
Sure.
But, it might be an older relationship or an older belief system that you had in a relationship that's creating the stress and the anxiety that then unfortunately a lot of times we pay forward. So anyways, whenever I start feeling that stress about change, I remind myself that it's not about what's next. So stop resisting what's next and start working on what belief system is keeping you from moving forward.
I love that. It's the unlearning. It's the unlearning what we know to be so, right? I think that's the most dangerous space to be in is knowing what is so. And I will say the older I get, like I feel like I have some conviction in what I believe and the more undermined that becomes and the more I'm going, you know what? I don't know. I'm showing up and doing the best I can with the knowledge that I have in this very moment. And the more I learn, the less I know. And that's a really once you're comfortable with that, I think it's a real gift. It's a real gift to be a non-expert in a world of experts who are constantly trying to prove themselves, and that's a hard and impossible pace to keep with.
It's just, it's for me, it's been a lot of like hard conversations with my ego driving this. I mean, I'm trying to be
Yeah.
way more aware of how I enter my own space. I'm trying to be way more aware of, golly, this has become the Corey podcast. I apologize. But
This is good. What are you talking about? This is good. I want to hear more about that. So like, what impact do you want to make in the world? Like, what is the thing that you want people to be saying about you 20 years from now, 100 years from now?
I've got it.
What's the impact?
Well, I mean, let's remove the word impact because I think that puts too much pressure on what is, right?
Good.
But how I'd like to be remembered, like if somebody's eulogizing me, I
Sure.
want to be the person that you always felt comfortable coming to, even with hard conversations, because I'm not gonna be ego first, and I'm not gonna be like I'm not gonna be like I'm not gonna bite you to bite you because I have something to protect. I would much rather say, oh, okay, back up. And this is a mantra, and you and I talked about this a little bit. I live in mantras, right? And one of my mantras is I just brain farted it, but but I totally did. But I totally brain farted my own mantra.
I
But
love that. It's a gift of unknowing. I love it.
it's the gift of unknowing. Exactly.
You're
Well,
living it. You're living it.
I mean, but here's something else that I really believe in is mind space. And what the mind space is that not giving anybody my energy. And what that means is that if I open the door for you and you don't say thank you, that I remind myself that I didn't open the door for a thank you because that would be an investment. What I opened the door for was just to be a better gift or just to be a better person in society.
That reciprocation is a trap, right? It's often a trap that people fall into, and it builds that resentment, that negative energy of like, hey, I've given this, where is mine? And I think that's a really powerful space that you've created for yourself to go, wait, this is how I want to show up in the world, and I own my responsibility for showing up there, and I let go of anybody else's response to it. That is probably the healthiest thing that I think we all could do. Because then stress, when we talk about stress, like you're not stressed about that person's response. You're not going to get heightened by them saying, hey, jerk. It's like, oh, well, I'm not a jerk though. Like I'm not, that's okay. Like you can have that response and I'm going to continue to show up the way I show up.
Yeah. I try hard to stay middle ground. Because even when I get excited, like I know that and we probably talked about it before too, but when I get excited, there's also like a negative return to that. With every action, there's a negative reaction.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So I don't do that. I am I live high. I live very, very high. And I will say, like, sometimes that comes with that period of just going, ugh.
Yeah.
Like after every talk I give, I'm excited to get to my hotel room and retreat and order in some Uber Eats. Just like have that like moment, because that's how I recover. But I don't think that it necessarily has to go to that negative place. My energy is always very, I mean, like you saw me on stage just before we started recording this podcast. We talked about like I bounce. I just bounce, and I have a hard time even sitting still in my. But that's who I am. Like I show up with that energy. That's not you're going to see one Rebecca on the stage, one Rebecca off the stage. Like that's just, I think, who I am and how I show up in the world. So, yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to know why you feel like having that flat line is healthier.
Um, I had a very violent childhood,
Mm.
and certainly my position as being a father, we'll get back to that, is that I was so terrified. I was probably a little too lenient
Mm-hmm.
with my, I probably went the other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because I was so scared of who I can become, that it was really important for me to control who I could become. And I was
Yeah.
more terrified of what I could be than what I could control. If
Ooh.
that makes any sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. That
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. And I wonder too if, and I'm not you, I'm curious about this. I wonder too if you rob yourself of some of the joys of the highs, out of the fear of the lows, out of the fear of that violence that could erupt. And
Um,
I wonder what it would look like.
Listen, I can get excited, but also here's what else happens though too, Rebecca, is that when I get excited, I get ego forward. You know,
Ah, okay. Yeah. Yep.
so when I get
That's a good
excited,
observation to have.
and,
Yeah.
I get ego forward, and that the only observation is because I've stepped on my own dick enough times to be like, yeah, that wasn't the best thing. You know what I mean? But also,
Yeah.
part of my practice too, and I've been doing this for 20 years now. Literally, I started when I was 35. Is I had a conversation. Gabby, I'm so sorry. We're just chatting away here.
And
I'm
I
just
have to
internalizing
apologize
it. I'm
too.
taking it
I
all
have to
in.
apologize too. I have a call in 3 minutes. Um,
Okay, cool.
we're
We
we need
can
to
end it here.
continue this conversation.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely can. We could do. Yeah, we could probably just do this on the phone. We don't have to record it. That's all.
It's
All right,
great. It's great
Rebecca.
stuff.
No problem. No problem. How can people find you? How can they locate you?
Oh man, I hate to cut it off there.
I know,
Golly.
dude. I know.
Well, listen, I'm easily reached. You can find me on my website, Rebecca Heiss, HEISS.com. You can find me on the Instagram at Dr. Rebecca Heiss. You can email me, Rebecca at Rebecca Heiss. Look, don't be shy. I'm a big fan of taking action. I'm a big fan of showing up for yourself. And so if there are ways that I can help you in any way, shape, or form, don't hesitate to reach out. I promise I will get back to you. It may take me a month, but I will. So I appreciate your time and having me on here and the conversation. My gosh, I feel like we could talk for hours here.
I feel like we should actually, to be honest.
Let's do it. Let's follow this up.
We definitely can follow this up. Gabby, thank you for hanging out with me. Thanks for all that you do. And I would say, thanks for you brought the cup, but I totally dictated the conversation. I apologize.
No, it's good. It's good to listen.
Please don't apologize.
I like to just especially, well, I'm not going to say that. I like to listen a lot of times and just internalize.
I'm saying, I like to listen to older people and their experiences, where she was going with that. And she stepped out of being old.
Yeah, Corey and I had a conversation about that. I was like, I am a leader. I am a professional.
Yes, you are.
All those things, and step into that space, because you just own it. Just own that space.
And Gabby, often a leader listens more than anybody else.
Yeah.
Actually, leaders do listen more than anybody else,
So,
if not that it's that ego talking anyways. Exactly.
Yeah.
Dr. Rebecca Heiss, honored that you're here. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and thanks for just blowing me away with everything from the moment that I saw you on stage, and I was like, that is someone I need to chat with. That Rebecca Heiss is gonna be my best friend. She doesn't know it yet, though.
I love it. I will be 100%. Let's definitely follow up. This is genuinely. I had a blast. My energy feels so calm and good and I hate that I have to go, but I'm now late, so I gotta sign off. Thank y'all so much. It's been a pleasure. Peace and love.
Peace and love.
Bye, y'all.
Thank you guys very much for joining us on
See you soon.